Hello and welcome back for our second episode of our second podcast, The Game Show, where the topic of discussion is purely focused on games. Today we'll be talking about some of our favorite games in the RPG genre.
Yes, that's right. And it is one of my favorite genres, if I do say so myself. So, Korean, before we begin, would you like to fill in some of our less savvy listeners on what we mean when we say RPG?
Of course, RPG is short for role playing game, and as the name suggests, these are games where you'll be taking the role of a specific character or characters.
So, like most games, like Mario or Sonic, right?
And not exactly. While most games do allow you to live in someone else's shoes, RPGs tend to have a specific focus on story and character progression. And it's worth noting that when I say character progression, I mean from a purely mechanical perspective in terms of gameplay. This is why games like Gone Home and Subnautica, two games I've mentioned in previous podcasts, are not typically listed as RPGs. Gone Home has a focus on story but little character progression, while Subnautica has a lot of progression but a minimalist story.
Couldn't have said that better myself. And in honor of that wonderful introduction, I think it's only fair that Korean gets first crack at this week's games.
Sure. Alright, well, today we are going to be talking about some really cool games. This is Adam's topic, so he divided the show into RPGs about the world, RPGs about the story, and RPGs about mechanics. So, my first RPG world game is Elder Scrolls Skyrim 5, or Elder Scrolls Bethesda Skyrim 5. I forgot what the official title is.
Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim.
Oh, thank you! Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. Uh, Memory is horrible. You can see by the gray hair. Anyway, so Skyrim is a game that came out, oh my god, 9 years ago on November 11th, 2011. It was a game published by Bethesda Entertainment, which is now owned by Microsoft. Sorry, I had to say that. All current generation consoles and future generation consoles, PC, Mac, and Linux, all have Skyrim. The world is just amazing. It's so easy to get lost in because there are so many things to do. Villages feel like real villages. The viewpoint adds to the realism because it's in first person. There's lore scattered around everywhere. People tells you stuff about the world. I mean, and this is an old series all the way back from Elder Scrolls Daggerfall to Elder Scrolls Oblivion to Elder Scrolls Skyrim. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, Daggerfall, Morrowind.
Ah, Morrowind.
Yeah.
Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim.
There's also Arena. There's a bunch of them.
There's a bunch of them. Oh, yeah, you definitely have the better knowledge than me. So in this game, you start off in a cart, and this is a very famous scene that people hate because if you play Skyrim more than once, this scene is like unskippable unless you install something in there. So you're in a cart, you've done something wrong, you're about to be decapitated, and you are saved when a dragon attacks a castle. Castle, I just went British for some reason. Castle. You are saved, and that begins your quest. You're thrown into a large realm, which in 2020 has so many mods that you could be playing this for at least 1,000 hours. I did try to reinstall this at one point, but I game hopped again. If you watched our previous show, I told Adam that I only played this for 172 hours. At the moment, there are tons of installers. If you're thinking about getting back into this game, I would highly recommend it, especially if you have an older computer, even if you have a newer computer. Now there are installers so that you just choose what do you want installed, and this thing will do everything for you. You don't need to use Nexus Mod Manager and manually install stuff and hope that everything works and nothing conflicts. If anyone's looking for a first-person RPG that allows you to do anything and is moddable to do anything. Given the pandemic, if you're short on cash and have a PC from the last 10 years, buy this, download the mods. It'll give you a game that you can play until next year. Why this is a world game for me, which is, I guess, what I skipped. Sorry, my voice. Is when I played this back in the day, I had just broken up with my first girlfriend that I got when I moved to Taiwan, and I was sad as hell. But this game, I played it must have been for 2 to 3 hours every day, and I mean after 172 hours, I'm like, what girlfriend? Yes, and that is it, Adam. Any thoughts about Skyrim? You play? How many hours did you put it in? Because when I said 172 hours before on another show, you're like, what?
Yeah, that sounds really low to me. I have no idea. Last I checked, I think it was in the 400s at least.
Oh my
It's been a
gosh.
long time since I played Skyrim, but I put a lot of time into it. Um, so what is it about the Elder Scrolls games that you like about in terms of world? Just the exploration, or
The world is just, it felt like you could do anything, go anywhere, and it was still like for someone like me who needs direction. I felt like I had direction, but I had choices about that direction. Uh, and I liked it was just the world, and you in the snowy environment, and the snow falling around, the snow on the trees, and walking everywhere, and Lydia, of course, marrying Lydia, having a house, cool.
all right? So yeah, it also has that day-night cycle, right?
Yeah, yeah. It just, I mean, at that point in my life, you know, sad after a breakup, I felt like, wow, I am Korean Padiachi, Dragonborn, Fasroda, and all that stuff.
Did you ever find yourself just not even playing, just walking around and exploring?
Oh no, 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 no. I'm a fairly violent individual in games. I just love shooting things and using magic and stuff. So I always went somewhere, kill something, or gained armor, or just crafting stuff, and it was just fun. I'm watching this now. I'm like, oh god, the game hopper in me is coming out. I'm like, stop playing the Switch. Install Skyrim again with a mod pack.
They have Skyrim on Switch, don't they? Do they
They,
have mods?
they do, and Skyrim on Switch is an interesting thing. You can actually use the two movement controllers to like shield and slash.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yes, I've always wanted to do it. Just never. It's Skyrim's on my artificially created wish list because Nintendo Switch does not have wish lists. You should change that, Nintendo, if you're watching.
All right. Well, yeah. Yeah, no, I've definitely put a lot of time in Skyrim, and I definitely was the kind of person that's just like, "Oh, look, a butterfly," and just walk around the forest.
I figured that would be you. I think when I've installed it twice or three times, and I do notice that after second installs and third installs. So Adam, what about your world game?
So for my world, I picked Divinity: Original Sin. Now, I think most people that are familiar with it are kind of surprised that I would pick it for world over mechanics. However, I do have another game that I want to talk about for mechanics. The reason I chose Divinity for world is just because, again, like Skyrim, it just allows you so much freedom. There's just so much going on. Now, it doesn't have that kind of living world that Skyrim does, with day-night cycles and people going on around their daily lives. But it does have that you can kind of go anywhere, you can do anything, you can solve things multiple ways. Uh, there's lots of quests that are, in fact, I think most of the quests are relatively skippable. Usually, there's multiple things you can do to move to get progression. So, for example, um, the part that I'm playing with online with my friends, and to get to the next part, we had to unlock 3 source points, and I think there's something like 5 or 6 or 7 different quests that allow you to unlock source points. So there's not even, say, a main quest per se. There's just kind of a main goal that you're constantly working towards, and I think that was really interesting in that there is a lot going through where you can see like some influence from they have the culture of the elves, and they have the culture of the humans and the dwarves, and you can go through and you can kind of interact with these individual groups and characters, and or you could just completely bypass them and never have to see them at all and not even know they're there. And I think that's just really, really cool that they did that, and that there's just so much that really, where most games like, say, Skyrim would say, here's the story. We're going to lead you to some of our big events or to some of our highlights, some of our main attractions. And they're going to send you on a path that's going to take you to those. And then you can kind of explore out from there. But Divinity is really just kind of like, you know what? There you are. Go at it. And there's really very little in terms of direction. It's not always good. I'll be honest. A lot of times I just pick up quests. I don't know why I'm doing a quest. I just know I'm supposed to go in this direction because there is a lot of story. But I like the open worldness of it, and I really wish that they had more games that did that, because it does really have that Dungeons and Dragons feel, where obviously in a video game you have a lot more limitations than your imagination, but this really does open that up. Now, I didn't go into any of the statistics of it, so I need to go back and back up all the way to the beginning All right, so Divinity Original Sin 2, it's released by Larian Studios. It originally came out on Windows back in September 2017. Later came out for the PS4 and Xbox One on August 2018. And then just last year in September, it came out for the Switch. So it is currently on PC and all three major consoles. And it has also been, I think it's been announced for the iPad, but it is not released on the iPad yet. So there should be an iPad version coming out in the future. Um, so I think this is a really great game for people that enjoy Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of sword and board type game, but also they really enjoy freedom and they really enjoy exploring a world, and people who are really big into details. There's a lot of games where you have lore and it's just presented at face value. There's a lot of games where there's lore and it's just kind of like way out of the way and you really have to dig to find it. This is one of those you have to dig to find it games. I wouldn't say the lore is as deep as it is in a lot of games. I would say like the Elder Scrolls probably has a lot deeper lore. Um, but but yeah, there is a lot out there for people that like to explore. And I think the best part about it is, like I said, there's so much to do that you could play it 4 or 5 times and approach things just in completely different ways every single time. So I think that freedom is a really great thing. So
Um, do you think you'll play this more than once? Like you're playing it with your friends now. Do you think you'll play it by yourself?
it's one of those things where I was playing it with my friends, and I was really thinking, like, you know what? I want to do a lone wolf run and go through this game on my own and do that again. I don't know if I will, only because, as we just covered, I'm a bit of a completionist, and my backlog is quite large. So once I've had this main story done, I would like to go back and do it again. However, I would want time to do that. There are other games that I have priorities on. So if for some miraculous reason I suddenly am able to finish everything, yes, I would absolutely want to come back and take a different approach to this. But until then, I do have other priorities to finish first because I have already gotten the gist of it by playing it multiplayer with my friends.
All right. So the reason, listeners, that we do this kind of show is to give you guys games that we think you should buy or you should play. So Adam, my question to you is, who do you think this game is not for?
I would say this is not for people that like direction. I've seen recently on a lot of forums and stuff that some people feel there's an oversaturation of open world games, and some people want more kind of the traditional guided games that kind of give you a set path. So this is definitely not for those people because there is a lot of freedom here. This is also not for the kind of person who just wants to kind of jump around, and there is a lot of planning that goes into this. So if you are the kind of person who likes to just create custom builds all the time and constantly changing your character and that sort of thing, I don't think you're going to get very far in this game just because there's so much to do that you're going to constantly be re-experimenting, and you're just not going to get very far. Uh, this game is definitely about synergy and how your character's abilities work with other characters' abilities. For instance, you put oil on the ground, you can set it on fire. You put water on the ground, you can electrify it, or you can put fire down, which will turn it into steam, which interrupts enemies' vision. So there's definitely a lot of synergy in the abilities. And if you're the kind of person who is always trying to like, I have a friend who's always trying to customize stuff, and he's changed his build 4 or 5 times already, and each time, he's finally found one that he really really likes. But up until then, it was just like, oh, you do a fight, he needs to rebuild. You do a fight, he needs to rebuild. Because trying to find that thing that he really liked. So if you're that kind of person, you might find it fun, but you might find it as a bit of a slog as well.
Okay, that's I think that is the perfect information that people need to know to make a decision about whether to pick this up if they haven't picked it up or they bought Divinity 1 but haven't bought Divinity 2 yet. Adam and I have played this twice. Adam's playing it right now. Highly recommend it, as Adam has said before.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to our second category, which is games, RPG games that have really good story for each of our respective viewpoints. For me, that game has to be Fallout 4. Uh, I've played Fallout 4 when it came out, however many years ago it was, in November 10th, 2015. Again, another Bethesda Game Studios game. It is out on all current generation consoles, as well as PC, Mac, and Linux. I don't think this will be ported into next generation consoles. I wouldn't be surprised if Skyrim is ported into next generation consoles, because that's what Skyrim is. That is the meme on the internet. Skyrim is going to be everywhere. This is one of the games where the story really hit me. Don't worry, I won't spoil it, but even 5 years after the game was released, I remember I still made a decision that haunts me in real life. Because looking back on it, it was the wrong decision or an evil decision. Some people may think the story is average, but for me, it was amazing. The choices that you had to make and the sides that you had to choose. Um, I've never experienced anything like it. That being said, I've only played Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. I didn't play Fallout, the original Fallout or Fallout 2. So this game is set within an open world, post-apocalyptic environment that encompasses the city of Boston and surrounding Massachusetts region known as the Commonwealth. You wake up and you essentially have to survive and figure out what is going on. Like most Fallout games, the choice is yours, or what you do and how you do it. If you haven't played a Fallout game before, if you haven't played a Fallout game before, definitely give this a go. If you skip this when it was released, get it on sale because it is definitely worth the play. One thing I will note on PC is that it doesn't have as many mods as some of the other versions of Fallout, so once you finish it, you are pretty much done. Um, Absolutely lovely game. Uh, I, I really would like to talk about the decision that I made, but if you haven't picked this up yet, looks great. It'll run absolutely great on new computers, even older computers. Bethesda's games are always really well optimized. Definitely pick it up. If you're somebody who doesn't like, the VATS system or the way Bethesda does combat or anything like that, I would probably say watch some streamers on Twitch, watch some videos on YouTube, and then let me know. Oh no, don't let me know. And then think about it. And then if you like what you see, just give it a go.
All right. So yeah, I'm kind of interested you picked Fallout 4. I mean, I really enjoyed Fallout 4 as well, but it gets a lot of hate on the internet these days.
Yeah, I mean, even when I played it, I remember playing the game when people were like, "Wow, this game is terrible. This sucks. The story, the choices are very linear." I mean, I would even say the game is bilinear because there is like only really two paths you can take. Because I know you were a big fan of Fallout Vegas, if I remember correctly.
Actually, I'm not as big a fan. I liked Fallout 3 more than Vegas actually.
Oh, okay,
But I know a
okay.
lot of people. Vegas is the one on the internet that everyone raves about.
So I played that, and I can see why in terms of choices. But for me, like this game was like it just has that sort of like impact of something. And when I did the thing in the game, I'm like, oh my god, what did I just do? And for the rest of the week, every day I went, everywhere I went, I'm like, oh my god, I just did this choice. I'm a bad person. I'm going to hell, even though it's all virtual.
So, what do you think about now? This obviously impacts the story. In every Fallout prior to this, you play as a silent protagonist, and that really allows you to, um, basically, a silent protagonist with no backstory or very minimal backstory, which really allows players to kind of fill in their own interpretation of the character. This one obviously is voiced and has a very solid backstory. How do you feel about that decision and how it impacts the game overall?
I understand some people not liking that, because this guy does have a voice, sort of in the Mass Effect series. You have the John Shepard voice, and that's what everyone knows. And I think that's sort of similar like this. Like this is a voice, and this is who you are, and you can role play being this guy with this voice. And I think that's fine. It didn't bother me at all. I think that is actually better because sometimes a good voice actor will voice a character in such a way that it sort of it gives you a greater connection with that character because you feel like the energy and the timbre and the voice gives you indicators of like this is the kind of person that I am.
Okay, yeah, I really like that in Dragon Age and in what was it, Mass Effect. But yeah, for me, for Fallout, having played the previous ones where you were always silent, that was probably the most jarring thing for me was the voice, just because there would be times where I'd want to say something, and I remember in like Fallout 3 or in Fallout New Vegas where I'm playing, and then I'm looking at the comment and I'm imagining my character saying it with kind of a snarky tone or saying it with very seriously. But here there's no interpretation of how your character says it. It's just blatantly, so I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a little bit sarcastic, and then the line comes out completely different, and I'm like, oh no, that's not what I wanted to say. I would have chosen the other option if I had known they said it that way. Um, so yeah, but I mean, did you have any situations like that where you felt like, oh, maybe this should have gone a slightly different way, or they should have interpreted it differently, or?
As far as the story goes in the game, there are certain things where I figure the choices you made, they should have been an extra choice, or things should have gone. I agree with you. Things should have gone a different way. I can't think of any offhand, uh, but there just these sort of certain choices where I feel like, oh man, I wanted this person to survive, or oh, making this choice shouldn't have made me the bad person. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I definitely had that sometimes where I'm thinking like, oh, okay, this is the nice person choice, and then the character says it in some really mean way, and then it's like, oh no, no, wait, that was the bad guy option. I thought it was, yeah, yeah, they took that in a completely different direction than what I was thinking I was going in.
totally.
So,
All
all
right.
right, yeah, no, I really liked Fallout 4 though too. I felt like mechanically it was definitely better in terms of what do you call it, like first person shooters. Like the previous Fallouts, I could not play as a shooter. I had to play it with VATS. And this one, I felt like I actually could play it a little more freeform. So,
True, true, true.
yeah. All right. So for my story game, I'm going to go with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which is a very popular game and quite the opposite on the internet in terms of as far as Fallout 4 in terms of reception. Um, and again, I'm kind of the opposite too. But here, sorry, I'm getting muddled again. So I'm going to start with the background on it. It was created by CG Project Red. You probably know them because they are working on Cyberpunk 2077, which should be coming out soon, but keeps getting pushed back. So eventually it will come out, hopefully before 2077. Witcher 3 was originally released on the PC, PS4, and Xbox One in May 2015. It was later released on the Switch October last year, 2019, and it is going to get a re-release on next-gen consoles in 2021. And if you previously own it on a current-gen console, I'm pretty sure you can get the upgrade for free on the next-gen consoles. So currently it is available on PC, PS4, Xbox, and Switch. So the reason I really like the story in this game is it's very in depth and it's very cohesive. And like Krian said, the way the voice acting is done adds so much to the game. Typically, I really like games with an open ended character like Fallout or to an extent Mass Effect, where I can kind of create my own character. But I think it worked really, really well here in that Geralt has his own personality. So basically, instead of having like, oh, I want this kind of Geralt, like you could say like, oh, I have this kind of Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, or I have that kind of Commander Shepard. This is always going to be Geralt. It's always going to be him. All the options are always going to be appropriate to his character. So basically, you just kind of choose in this moment, is Geralt going to be more of a sympathetic character, or is he going to be more pragmatic? So they do a very good job with that. I also think the lore in it is very, very well done. There's lots of depth to things, and there's lots of. It's one of those games where when you play it, you probably should have an internet browser nearby so you can look up names and places because they are going to be referencing a lot. Now, I think this definitely has the advantage in the sense that it comes from a book series, so there's a lot of background already there that they don't really have to develop. I also think that that was actually a very good design choice. A lot of games, when they come out, they feel like they kind of have to spoon feed you everything, especially if a game is like a new IP, like, for example, Horizon Zero Dawn, because there is no background. So you have to collect everything. In The Witcher 3, they throw you in, and unlike other games where they basically rehash everything, they basically just said, you know what? we're just going to play this game, and you're either going to have to figure it out on the fly, or you're going to have to look it up. And they pretty much provided you with everything you would need in game if you're willing to look for it. So, um, but the story is very good. It's very in depth. The characters, especially, are very, very well thought out. They interact very, very well together. Um, I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but this is basically the conclusion of Geralt's story, so to speak. He had kind of a character arc in the books, and I think in the last book, they kind of assumed that, okay, see, it's done. Uh, Post book, those all the Witcher games take place after the book series, so they're later down the line. This is an older Geralt. It is a more mature Geralt. But they've basically had their arc, and Witcher 3 kind of finishes that off. So it does give a good kind of conclusion to that. Now, obviously, there's going to be a Witcher 4 because this is so popular. But I think they had a good place to end it. So the kind of game that this is for is basically people who are really, really into story and character and really in depth. If you're the kind of person who likes TV shows like Game of Thrones or something like that, where there's a huge cast of characters and everybody's very important in their own way, and just the dynamics between them is very, very both subtle and dramatic. You're really going to love Witcher 3. There's a lot of that in there. There's not the political intrigue, it's more character driven. But yeah, I think if you're that kind of person, you're going to enjoy it. So, also, it's very, very long, so make sure that you have plenty of time before you play it. So, yeah. The other interesting thing, though, is it does not only is it based off of the books, but it is CG Projekt Red is a Polish developer company. They're a Polish development company. The original books, the writer is Polish, and it heavily references a lot of these Eastern European lore, legends, and stories of fairies and werewolves and that sort of thing. So this is kind of an interesting way to get into some of the kind of lore that gets overshadowed by more of the, say, English speaking world or Celtic world. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap in some of these stories. But at least in America, growing up, we had a lot of the more, the Irish legends or the English legends, that sort of mythology. And so seeing that kind of more Eastern European, Poland and Scandinavia and that sort of thing is very interesting, actually. So.
Okay. Um, so what was, I mean, of course you like the story of this world, but what was something you liked about The Witcher besides the story?
I could make a long list of things I didn't like. There were definitely a lot of flaws. On the internet, it's kind of the messiah of games, and having played it much, much later than when it came out, I was like, oh my god, there are so many flaws in it that I don't know why it gets so many passes. But there are a lot of things I like. So I did like the fact that the quests typically do have more than one solution to them. And they do have at least somewhat of an impact later in the game. So, for example, uh, there's a part where you meet this one. People think she's a witch. She's actually a sorceress. And you go through her whole quest, and at the end, she kind of does this shady thing. And you can either choose to be totally okay with it, or you can choose to kind of let her go, but tell her, if I ever see you again, I'm going to finish you off. Or you can just kill her right then and there. And uh, this character, depending on your choices, later on in the game, the character may or may not come back to assist with other things. So I do like that in the game, that your choices and who you help and that sort of thing do impact things later on down the line. So it's not as open-ended as, say, Divinity, in that you can do anything any way you want. Usually there's probably only maybe 3 solutions to a problem. But I do like the fact that there was that kind of forward thinking to it, and kind of foreshadowing in a way where, I do this with this character and it will impact it, something later on, for better or worse. Sometimes, you might let somebody go, you have mercy on somebody, and later on it turns out that they've actually just sold information about you to some other group that now wants to kill you or something like that. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, I did like just kind of how everything kind of meshes together. It's woven very well, I will say.
Okay, to add, Cyberpunk is went gold 2 weeks ago.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so it's definitely coming out November 19th, 2020. Do you think you'll be picking it up?
Uh I yes, probably. It's one of the things I have other priorities that I'm kind of like I am buying this like near automata, not near automata. I keep saying near automata. Near replicant is a priority for me. I would like to play it, but I think it might be one of those. I don't think I'll play it on release. I think it's going to be one of those games that I might wait a few months until kind of an opening in my backlog shows up.
Sure, sure,
Because
sure.
Witcher 3 was very, very long. But what I have heard that's actually interesting is that CD Projekt Red did say that they're shortening Cyberpunk. Um, so they want to shorten it because a lot of people were saying that Witcher was very long. However, they're trying, excuse me. However, they are going to try to uh, give you more options. So they're trying to add more replay value. So in the end, the idea is that you're going to get the same amount of gameplay that you would out of The Witcher. It's just that in The Witcher, it's one long continuous thing, and here it's a shorter thing, but you can attack it different ways. So every time you play, it's going to be slightly different. So I am looking forward to that. That sounds very interesting. I know that's a very difficult thing to do well, so I will probably wait and see what other people are saying before I jump in on that.
Okay. All right, and then we're moving on to our last category of today, RPGs with which mechanics that excited us or that we loved. My mechanics game is Dishonored, the original Dishonored, published by Arcane Studios. It came out on October 9th, 2012. Coincidentally, Arcane is coming out with a PS5 exclusive called Deathloop, which I'm really, really interested in. I might ask, I might buy it and just go to Adam's house to play it when he gets his PS5.
More than welcome.
Thank you. So what it is a stealth action game where you play an assassin known as Corvo. The voice acting is great as well as the graphics. I mean, even at that time, Dishonored looked amazing. I must say I never finished the first one, but I did finish the second one. That being said, the mechanics for this game are great. It's one of the first games that I played that sort of gave you the power of Nightcrawler. And so some of you who never watched X-Men, Nightcrawler was this guy that had a tail and had blue skin, and he could teleport anywhere. And that was his like coolest power, the ability to move to any place. There've been movies that do this, but Nightcrawler was the man. So in Dishonored, you can teleport anywhere. You can, if you see a ledge, if you see a place, if it's within your vision, you can go there. And as you sort of gain character progression, you gain power. The teleportation becomes much faster, much quicker. I'd highly recommend you Google Dishonored kills on YouTube and watch some of the things. There are some guys with really fast reflexes, younger than me, and they do these amazing like kills where they teleport, slice a guy, teleport here, push this guy down into the river, teleport back, and it's just like this cool sort of like power fantasy I've always had of not killing people but just teleportation. You will find some like just really cool things. The mechanics of the game, the way you accumulate power, the way you can use power, but at the same time, with all this power, you are still not a god in the game. There are still situations where when you're playing Dishonored, you say you think you can like I can take these guys on. Actually, you can't take these guys. There's just too many guys, and despite having all these superpowers, you still have to be careful. Dishonored also has a really cool world. If you're looking at the trailer next to me, it's sort of like this steampunkish world with sort of magic and robotics and swordplay and like old gunpowder pistols inside, and it's absolutely a fantastic world. But I chose it for my story, for my mechanics, just because to me at that time in 2012. It did some really interesting gameplays with how you can use powers and how you give your players choices by the powers that they have. One thing I will say is that there are situations that require stealth. That's one of the reasons I never finished the first game, is that I'm not a big stealth person. I like action more. I would say Dishonored 2 is a bit better in that sense, in that you can actually have the choice between stealth and action. But Dishonored 1, there are certain situations where you have to use stealth, others you just can't pass the game at all. Um, very cheap at the moment. Definitely pick this up. It will run on your modern system. It will run on your system from 10 years ago. Absolutely fantastic first-person action stealth game.
All right. So, fun side note: the only reason I played the original Dishonored was actually because Korean, when he bought it, got two copies, and so he gave me his spare copy. I don't know if you remember that or not.
I do not remember that. When was
Yeah,
this?
yeah. They accidentally gave you two copies, and you're like, "Oh, I have this spare copy. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." So that's the only reason I played it. Um,
Oh,
so yeah. So
Jesus.
is this trailer from the original Dishonored, or is this Dishonored 2?
This is the trailer because Dishonored 2 features Corvo's daughter.
Ah, that's right. Was it his daughter? I thought it was the princess that he was supposed to protect or something.
Oh yeah, like he's in the story, he's a pseudo daughter.
His daughter. All right.
Yeah.
So when you played, did you play as the stealth way, or did you go more of an action route?
Oh, I'm very famous in my brothers. I'm always the shoot first, think later kind of person. So I did action as much as I could. There are points where uh, I did have to use stealth, like I said before. That's one of the reasons. Like when I was researching this and I'm looking at my Steam record, I'm like, oh my god, I never finished it. I did finish number 2, and I'm like, oh, I should put this on my list of things to play again and actually finish. So I put it on my list, and I'm gonna hopefully play this game somewhere when we do not have a back-breaking backlog and just a backlog.
So how does character progression work? How does the leveling and all that work?
So, hey, didn't you play this?
I did, but maybe our audience didn't.
Oh, yes, good point. So, the way character progression works is you start off the game, there's a story, you get betrayed. If you just saw the trailer, it says revenge is everything. You know, so you go around, you do missions, you meet somebody, and he sort of empowers you with all these supernatural powers. As you do missions, and you find these sort of certain things in the game, I can't remember what they are. Do you remember what they are, Adam?
What
The things that you get.
scrimshaws?
One more time.
The scrimshaws, the whale bones.
Oh, yes. Why do you have such a good memory? So, you get the whale bones. Whale bones allow you to get points that allow you to sort of improve your skills or abilities. Skills, abilities, and skills. And there's also, I'm not sure, could you improve the equipment you are carrying? Because I know that you could do that in Dishonored 2. I can't remember if that's in Dishonored
I
1
think
as
you
well.
could in Dishonored 1 if you
Okay.
could upgrade the knife.
Okay. So yeah, so you've got the physical stuff you carry as well as your supernatural powers, like teleportation, like controlling the rats, like this sort of special supernatural vision that you have. That's how you progress.
All right, fantastic. I covered most of my
Nice.
covered. Yeah.
All right,
All right,
let's.
so I'm gonna move into my last game for mechanics. World of Final Fantasy. I would feel remiss if I covered a RPG episode and did not have at least one Final Fantasy entry in there. So here's my obligation. So World of Final Fantasy, which was actually probably the least known Final Fantasy. I know some people are probably looking at this trailer right now and they're like, "Wait, what? When did this game come out?" It came out in 2016 in October. It is published by Square Enix, and it is available on PC, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PS Vita. However, if you want the upgraded version Magus, that is not available on the Vita. That is only available on other systems. So, World of Final Fantasy is its own unique story. Basically, what happens is you play as a brother and sister team named Rain and Vaughn, if I remember correctly. And basically, what happens is they wake up one day and they're going through their routine and they suddenly realize, why are we here? Why are we going through this routine? Like, literally, we're in a coffee shop. Nobody exists in this city except for us. So they kind of wake up from this kind of trance that they've been in for a while. And it turns out that there's some stuff going out in the world and that they need to basically solve where did everybody go, what's going on, and explore this world. And of course, all different parts of the world are from previous Final Fantasy games. You're going to meet multiple characters from previous Final Fantasy games. You're going to be meeting monsters from previous Final Fantasy games. So the mechanics of it that make it really interesting is that this game is kind of a Pokemon gotta catch 'em all kind of deal. So what happens is you have your characters, and your main characters can go between two sizes. They can go through what's called a giant and what's called a Lilliputian, which basically plays into in the game. This allows you to do certain things. For instance, giants is a taller character. You can see here you have lots of short little characters, and you can see the main characters are quite a bit taller. When they're taller, they can reach things that they couldn't reach when they're small. So, for example, they can walk up to a house and pick up a treasure chest that's on the roof. When they're smaller, they can fit in places that they wouldn't be able to fit in normally. This also comes into play in combat. Now, when this game came out, Final Fantasy VII Remake had already been announced, and there was a big debate on whether it should be active time battle like a traditional Final Fantasy, specifically Final Fantasy VII itself, or if it should move into this action oriented, which they ended up kind of going with. And a lot of traditionalists wanted that active time battle system. A lot of newer, younger players were saying that turn-based is dead. It's not fun. Nobody likes it. It should be done away with, and nobody should use it anymore. This game actually uses that traditional system, and it works really, really well. So I would say just look at the game like this or Persona to say that, yeah, turn-based games definitely still have a place. But the way it works is basically you can have up to 6 party members at a time, but in a way, they can actually act as 2 party members. And the way that works is actually when you collect the monsters in the game, they're called mirages, and they're kind of like the Pokemon of this game. When you collect a mirage, it comes in one of 3 sizes: large, medium, or small. And you can stack your mirages, so a medium can sit on top of a large, and a small can sit on top of a medium. So you can have a tower. And as I said before, your characters can be either that large or medium size themselves. So what happens is when you do this, you actually combine aspects of all 3 of the parts of the tower. So their hit points are added together, access any kind of magic that one has access to, the whole tower has access to, any kind of elemental weaknesses or strengths they will apply to the tower. So, for example, if you have and part of your tower is is fire resistant, and the other 2 are either neutral or also fire resistant, you're going to have a fire resistant tower. If you have one that's fire resistant, but you also have one that is fire weak, so they are, so you have a fire mirage and an ice mirage, put them in the tower together, and now fire just basically does normal damage. So there's a lot of kind of picking what you want when you create your towers and which characters want to go with what, because you could either supplement strengths, or you could just really kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, counteract their weaknesses. So it is kind of interesting. And then also when you collect the mirages, some mirages, actually similar to Pokemon, have multiple forms. However, unlike Pokemon, where you basically just evolve through your forms, these mirages, as you level them up, you can unlock new nodes within them, which will unlock new spells. It'll increase their defense or offense or whatever. But once you reach a certain point and you've unlocked them to a certain level, you can then unlock other forms. And then that one, so for example, if you have, say, Ifrit, which is a traditional Final Fantasy summon, Ifrit himself is a large base that you could use. However, there's a smaller version of Ifrit, and once you get your Ifrit to a certain level, you could actually devolve him into the smaller version of it. He still has access to all the things that he had in his previous form, but now he's smaller. So instead of making him the base, if you have another monster like a behemoth that you want to be the base, you could still keep your Ifrit, but just move him in as a medium-sized Mirage as opposed to a larger Mirage. So this is actually really, really interesting. Unfortunately, this trailer doesn't really get to show you how too much of the combat. You see a little bit of it. But yeah, it's just really interesting in that it's kind of a build your own character in a way. And there is some strategy in that enemies will also have their towers, and you can kind of certain attacks will destabilize the tower. You'll start seeing them kind of wobbling back and forth, and then eventually they might even fall over. And then of course you can attack the individual parts of the tower, which can disrupt them. So yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting system. I've never seen it used anywhere else. Um, if I'm being entirely honest, I'm not sure if it would work anywhere else, but it works really, really well for this game. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Um, I'm very curious because I mean this looks really cool. I've got a few questions. The sort of like, Funko Pops, right?
Yes.
So some of the characters sort of like have like a Funko look. Are there actual Funko Pops of these Final Fantasy World of Final
Uh,
Fantasy characters?
there's definitely Funko Pops of the Final Fantasy characters out there. I don't know if they're specifically. I don't think they're specifically designed after this game,
Okay.
and I don't think that this game is specifically designed after them. I think that's kind of a coincidence. I think here the reason they did the smaller characters with the big head, I think that's more of a tribute to the older Final Fantasy sprites that we saw like back in Final Fantasy VI before. The old, so back they had that kind of chibi look to them with the giant head and the small bodies. Just because that looked really, really good on, say, Super Nintendo, stuff like that. So this is kind of a throwback to those older games. But yeah, I think that they do have them, but I don't think they're specific to Final Fantasy World of Final Fantasy. I think they're more like, oh, this is the Final Fantasy VIII Funko Pops or the Final Fantasy VII Funko Pops. So
So you mentioned this is out on PC, but as far as PlayStation goes, do you know what the cost is?
not off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up on the PlayStation Store. It's been out, like I said, since 2016, so it's shouldn't be that much. It does go on sale from time to time. However, much like Final Fantasy 15, which you had the original game, and then later on they came out with the Final Fantasy 15 Royal, which was kind of an expanded version of it, and it had expansions in it. This similar, you have World of Final Fantasy, and then you have World of Final Fantasy Magus, and Magus is the expanded version. So, for example, in World of Final Fantasy, you do not have access to any of the Final Fantasy 15 characters. They're just not in there because I think this game came out prior to Final Fantasy 15. However, in Magus, the Final Fantasy 15 characters make an appearance. You have access to more summons. So in the traditional Final Fantasy games, you have summons like Shiva, Ifrit, Ramuh. Here, all those characters are mirages, but you do still have summons, but now the summons are other Final Fantasy characters. So you can summon Cloud or Squall or Lightning, which coincidentally all have weather names. But you can summon all these characters. So they're the new versions of the summons. So yeah. So.
Yeah, for PC users, I just looked up the price. If you're interested, it's 780 Taiwanese dollars on Steam as of a few seconds ago, or about 25 US. Um, I'm actually thinking of picking this up. I told you I've always wanted to play a Final Fantasy game, and for someone like me, do you think this is a good place to start? Because I've never played any Final Fantasies, is this a good place to start, or would you like say, hey, don't do this just yet, play something else first?
Okay, so I'll say this. World of Final Fantasy, one of the flaws of it is that for a long time, the first, I would say the first half of the game, at least, if not more than the first half of the game, is pretty much rides on nostalgia. Basically, the whole thing is, you're meeting these characters from other Final Fantasy games, and if you haven't played those games, you might not really understand the significance of some of these things. You can definitely understand the story. You'll follow everything. But it's one of those things, for example, where you're fighting the Ghost Train, and if you've played previous Final Fantasies, you're like, oh, the Ghost Train. Oh my God, this is so great. And if you have not played the previous Final Fantasies, you're like, why is this train a ghost? I don't understand. Can trains die? So there is definitely, for somebody who hasn't played previous Final Fantasies, and I wouldn't even say just one, for somebody who hasn't been playing the Final Fantasy franchise for a while, the first half of the game, you're really not going to get much out of it because they are basically just kind of riding on nostalgia. Now, that said, the second half of the game, pretty much once you reach the Crystal Tower and after, that's when it really becomes its own game and the main characters really start to develop, because prior to that, they're basically just vessels for the player to meet Final Fantasy characters. They don't have a lot of personality on their own. They don't really do a lot on their own. But the second half of the game is really when their world it establishes that this is their world, and this is why they are important to it, and this is what's really happening. So if you do, I would say you do have to play the whole game. If you're a game hopper and you're playing the first half, you're not going to get too much out of it, because it's really the second act or even the third act that really you start getting the story out of it.
Okay.
However, if you are the kind of person that is looking forward to playing other Final Fantasy games, this might be a good introduction, that you know all these characters' names, so that when you see them in the other games, you're like, oh, okay. And this is also going to be a good introduction into, say, the monsters uh, that you're commonly going to see. You know, behemoths, Sagahen, um, you know, those sort of things. So when you see those, and then or is it Emerald, the big one-eyed monster? Uh, so playing this, you're going to have an idea of all those, and because you're using them as your characters, you're like, oh, this one has fire based, this one's ice based. So when you go in back to another older Final Fantasy and you see something, you're like, oh yeah, I already know what that is. I already know how to deal with it, because you know, I've gotten a lot of background on that one creature here. So I wouldn't recommend it as an entry level to a Final Fantasy, unless you are the kind of person that's really like, you know what, I really want to go through and play all the Final Fantasies, and having that in mind first and foremost.
Okay. Okay. I will
Yeah.
definitely keep that in mind. I was gonna add this to my Steam wish list, and then I'll just wait and wait for the appropriate Final Fantasy to come around on Steam, and then I'll pick that up.
Yeah. Well, Final Fantasy 16 is coming out soon, so, or
Oh,
relatively soon. It's been announced. So.
maybe that is the thing.
But
Uh,
yeah, as far as who is this for specifically, I would say this is definitely for fans of Final Fantasy who've been fans for a long time. Um, if you haven't been a Final Fantasy fan for a long time, you're probably not going to get that much out of it. But if you're a really old, especially old school Final Fantasy fans like myself, are probably going to get the most out of it. Newer Final Fantasy fans are probably not going to even get that much out of it. I'd say people who are fans of like the Final Fantasies of the '90s, they're the target audience.
okay. Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right, well, that is about all we have time for today. Did we miss any of your favorite RPGs? If so, please leave us a comment anywhere you can find us at Gaming Age on Twitter, Middle Age Gaming on Instagram, Middle Age Gaming 2020 on Facebook, or just email us directly at middleagegaming2020 at gmail.com, and maybe we'll bring it up in a future episode.
Absolutely. And as always, you can find links to these games, or at least more information about these games, in the show notes, and which can be pretty much found anywhere you're looking for listening to us from: Google Podcasts, Spotify. You know, just look in the description. You'll find everything you need there. So check those out, so you can share with them with your friends. Give us some feedback if you think, oh yeah, you know, Divinity 2 is a great game for World, or if you think like, oh my God, why would you choose that? Clearly, this game was a better option, Adam. You should have talked about this one. Please let me know, and I will rectify that in future episodes. So that's going to conclude today's episodes, and we hope that you are looking forward to seeing us as much as we are looking forward to seeing you. So see you next time.
Okay, and Adam, we will be streaming not on Wednesday again, or Wednesday Taiwanese time. Next week we'll be streaming the doubleheader episodes on next week Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is the plan.
So
I got all my
October
medical
20th.
stuff out of the way. So
Oh, okay, good. So please tune in again. Taiwanese time will be starting at probably 9 a.m. Or maybe a little bit later. Again, I'll post it on social media. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and then you'll get those notifications. You'll know when to sit down, tune in, grab something to drink, and enjoy our discussion. And with that, we will call it a show, and looking forward to seeing you guys next week.
see you next time.
All right, bye-bye.